everybody's talked about collaboration, and the fund to a large degree is built on the notion of collaboration. And actually, it's one of those words that it seems to me sometimes you can just take it out of all the conversations, because broadly, unless there's collaboration, nothing much happens, full stop. But how do you do it well? I mean, from experience, James has just highlighted some issues there. Quite often you've got very different cultures in digital and arts collaborations, because you've got programmers who think the word string means long list of numbers, and people who read Shakespeare who think the word string means string. And likewise, you've got people from marketing in the BBC who've got one view, I'm sure, and people who are curators who want it to be done absolutely perfectly, all lit perfectly with the most absolutely high-end technology, who don't want any of these scrubby, awful people deciding what should be tagged and what they should say about it. Terrible way of putting it, but I've been there, so I know how that works. What are the common factors in managing, even a meeting? That you think you can bring together, that you've learned from over the years? Adrian, start with you maybe.
Well, I mean, I think getting everybody together from the start is the first thing. If you in the way that you conceive the project, if you've got content, design, and technology, and the other sort of communication in terms of marketing and awareness of it, and bring them all together, then everybody gets to have their view of that. In this particular case, in your paintings, of course, what the Public Catalogue Foundation had to do was to try to represent the interests of 3,000 different museums. Of course, within themselves had hugely differing views of this notion of authority and what they wanted within that, and so trying to balance a whole range of different things. But basically, it became iterative. The more you could show them and you could demonstrate that things actually worked from the ideas. So it's each step of the way was an exploration, which had a result. We did a big pilot, for example, in the tagger. There were a lot of skeptics in the academic world. I mean, the Glasgow and the Oxford art historians initially didn't like the idea of doing tagging. They couldn't conceive of it. It was horrible. But they worked with us to go through it. The people from the astrophysics department were very enthusiastic about it. And they showed a completely different way of handling this stuff, in the way that they present the information to that. So breaking down some of those perceived barriers was very good. So
dig in a bit more detail then to how do you get a curator, an artistic director, an artist to move on that journey? I mean, with your curators in whichever universities who started not wanting to have tagging involved, how does the conversation go?
Well, I mean, sometimes the conversations are very difficult, but if there's a spirit of achieving something at the end, I mean, that's where if you have in mind what are you trying to do, and be focused around that. That helps the conversation. At any points in that conversation, there will be divergent views about how to do it. But we had lots of face-to-face meetings. We've had lots of conference calls. We used Basecamp and other collaborative tools to share the ideas. And then we finally agreed, okay, well, this is what we're going to do. There were some people fully for it. Those that were like, well, I'm going along with it because that's in the common view of what we should do. And then gradually, people were one round based on the results of what we'd achieved. Right. And in some cases, we thought, oh no, well, we won't do that because that didn't seem to work. We'll do something else instead. But it's agile, flexible in its operation. You have to take that approach. You're not saying, I'm doing this, I'm specifying, and I'm building it. Everything becomes iterative, and you feedback constantly in terms of the user experience, the content, what I'm trying to do, the technology, and it becomes, that's the hard thing of making sure that everybody can keep that loop going within the sort of periods of time that you do it.
James, my sense is that when a project is collaborative and open in its model, there's a vision. Is a vision thing important?
Yeah, exactly. That's just what I've written down here, in fact.
Oh, you have actually. Sorry, I didn't crib that.
But much of our techniques are very similar to what has just been discussed, and I would just only add to it that what very important for us was this vision of openness and open Shakespeare, and getting many people as possible to use open Shakespeare and to give us their opinions on Shakespeare, because we're very much aware that there is the kind of Wikipedia problem of general differences in knowledge between our contributors, for example. Right. Not just knowledge between programming and artistic knowledge, but different knowledge of Shakespeare. And trying to find things that everyone can do, and making always clear someone's knowledge and what they know. For example, we're going to add the possibility to have subjective opinions on Shakespeare, and so build up a model of subjective responses. But always having a vision of openness behind that, and at the same time, subsidiary vision, so replicate the reading experience, for example. That's something that kind of grew up to go alongside that as a guide for what we wanted from our programmers, for example.
And kind of both of you to some degree, how do you go about testing whether your vision for replicate the read experience or the way you do your tagging process is actually working? I mean, is that you've got a live service, so I suppose to some degree it shows in what people do.
Yeah.
And as have you. But are there other ways, other tips that you sort of use for testing, for putting services in front of selections of users? I mean, what do you do to get intel on how to make these things successful?
Yeah, if I could go first. We, very early on with the annotation tool, we organised several specific annotation sprints once we knew it'd be working. So a day where we'd put out lots of publicity, tell people in Cambridge, come to the English Faculty Library, we're trialling this new tool. And so we'd have lots of people in one place using the tool. We'd ask them about what they thought was good, what was bad. And so having these kind of little focus groups, we've done two already through a whole day. And it really advanced our knowledge of how the tool was being used.
And a sprint is increasingly a common way of building digital projects, full stop, isn't it? A week or two, and then you review, as opposed to the sort of, let's take 6 months, write a huge document, and down the end of it, maybe the thing will be the thing we wrote the huge document about. Assuming anybody's read it or understood it, which from bitter experience I can tell you, if you don't know already, they don't by and large. So is that a model that works on a huge project of your scale?
Yes, indeed. And we followed the agile method, as a methodology as it's called, where you break the work down into a number of chunks, and you aim to deliver things within 2-week periods and review it. We did an awful lot of obviously concept development in the first place, leading to wireframes and where you're mocking up what you're doing. The planning, the user experience is vital in this, and make sure and then testing that before you've actually built something. So fortunately, working with the BBC and a third-party usability company, we were able to actually get a lot of people to see this. So we had the beautiful resources of the BBC's usability labs, and we spent days with people coming in, all being recorded, capturing keystrokes, looking at what they were doing, asking them questions about whether it worked or didn't, as a result of that, we constantly changed the interface to match the expectation of what we were doing. So the resulting workflow is one that's based on many hours of people looking at this and doing it. And then after we got to a point where we thought, right, we've got something that we think works, then we did a pilot. We did a pilot for 6 weeks. We got 600 users on there. We got 40,000 tags in 6 weeks, and we compared the results of the tagger to a gold standard which had been created by two academics at the Courtauld. And we discovered, to our delight, that the tagged result was actually better than the academics had been able to achieve in the same period of time, because there were more people piling in there. So of the tags that the academics had created, all of those existed in the user tags, plus more, which were also relevant. So that proved to us that the approach that we were taking works, and it was right. We got feedback on how does it feel to do it? Is it the right length for the flow? Is it exciting, engaging? We did add some of those features which James talked about, where we put on the idea we had different levels of user. So you first 10 tags, and you have a different level of user. So you have targets which you personally aim for, and so there are people now that we know who are competing to get to the next level and to be that next level of tagger. So we did a lot of things like that to try to make it more game-like, and using sort of existing knowledge about how these collaborative community tools work.
I'm going to come to the floor in a moment. But imagine for a moment that I haven't got access to the BBC's usability lab. What on earth do I do to test my £100,000 pilot-sized thing? I mean, from experience, what do I do?
Yeah. I mean, James could probably answer that in the fact that that's what they probably did. But I mean, I've worked on many other projects where they didn't have.
No, I appreciate. I was being facetious, but
the same thing. So, of course, given that things that you're doing are more often than not these days web-based, you might have a community of supporters, and other people that that is your existing community, and try and engage those. Depending on the project, you can use schools and other people. So it's relatively cheap to actually get get groups of people together. The important thing is to actually do it and remember to include that as part of your process, because that's absolutely vital. And I think where we ended up in terms of a tool was actually quite different to where we started. The vision was the same, but actually the details of it and the flow of it was only worked out through testing some of those propositions about how we wanted it to work. But it needn't be expensive at all.
James, thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would just like to re-emphasise the idea of to make use of existing groups as much as possible, really. We were lucky being in Cambridge, having the university there, the English faculty that were willing to let us use their computer suite a little. And of course, with your partner organisations, I'm sure they will already have existing groups around them, and really to make as much use of existing infrastructure as possible when you're testing early on, particularly because they then will have their own kind of satellites, and it allows you to enter that world much more easily.
And to some degree, both propositions are kind of, in the jargon, they're sort of perpetual betas. They're sort of evolving as they go along all the time.
Very much so.
How early do you let it free into the wild? Because part of the proposition here is you need to be able to, with this fund, you need to be able to get some feedback about how it's going. There's from my experience, certainly there's a sort of balance to be found between people who are looking for the perfect thing, final thing, and people who are saying, well, we just put it out there, we'll find out. How, in your experience, how do you find that balance? Who makes that decision?
Well, I mean, to me, the continuous learning and the perpetual beta is what we should all be doing. And I remember years ago when I was at the V&A having to go through this ridiculous process with the HLF where they wanted a specification for a project, which was a huge public, website, the British Galleries. And I argued and said, look, that is the wrong way to go about getting this funding. We got the funding, but they wanted all this document detail. This is the way to do it. It's a discovery process. It's user engagement. It's getting people involved. We will test this proposition. This is what we think they want, but we don't really know. And so the more you do that, the sooner you can get something out in whatever form. And it doesn't have to be the finished form. You can use paper, and you can use wireframing and very simple tools to show the journey of what you're expecting, and getting feedback from that doesn't cost a lot at all to do, but it's vital in terms of just qualifying, this is my assumption, does it work or not? And you'll get it quickly. Oh, that's brilliant, I totally understand. What you think you understand by a page and a journey, when you put it to 10 people, you very quickly discover that there are lots of things that, I don't know what this means. What's this language? Et cetera, et cetera. Those are very quickly solved totally inexpensively going through that process, on paper and simple wireframing.
But how do you square that with having a vision? I mean, isn't the vision about deciding what the product is? And isn't that what it is?
It depends on the project. Some cases the vision is very clear and what it is changes.
Okay, we're going to come to the floor. I had down here, Heather, and then this is the hottest talking table. So, okay, then I've got a lady over there and a gent here. So we've got 20 minutes, so we've got plenty of time, as long as your questions are questions, not statements of fact. Heather.
I think it's really good to hear both of you agreeing about the importance of testing user journey and using the people around you. I think it's a highly overinflated industry out there. The sort of quotes you get for some user-centred design documents are quite laughable, and I think the more people understand that you should use the people around you, the better. That isn't actually my question, but I thought of it since you were talking about it,
okay.
Because I think it's a bit of a snake oil merchant industry, that one. So I know you weren't funded through this criteria to make the projects, but what I was wondering while you were showing them is, if you had been, what elements of it do you think you would have made that were easily extractable and useful for the wider industry? I was thinking about your tagger tool and thinking, well, I've got a huge archive that could do with a brilliant tagger tool. I've got lots of my staff and volunteers tagging constantly because that's the only way we can do it. But if, for example, the tagger tool had been designed so that it was removable from your project really simply and not bespokely integrated into the design, do you actually think it would have been a feasible thing? Would it have cost a lot more money to do that? Or rather than it being just integrated into your project, but actually if I could take it to my project?
Okay.
Yes, and there's a simple answer to that, which is that it isn't quite as embedded as it looks. I mean, the interface is an interface, and that, of course, can be quickly changed to replace a different interface. We were very clear about the structure of this. It's very layered, it's very open, and it follows, modern web standards of abstraction and separation of the different components of it. So what you see, and what you do, what the workflows are, what the algorithms are to calculate, are all changeable for different projects, and we approach the build of it in that way, because we recognize that what we're doing was perhaps something that would be interesting to use in other projects. The core engine of it is the Galaxy Zoo, the Zooniverse back-end engine. That they've used for many different projects. What you see at the front end and what you have at the back end is generic, the front end is project specific. But
Okay.
technology is absolutely easily adapted to other things.
I'm going to follow that in a minute. James, it feels like yours is built to be extracted.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Open Shakespeare was built to show the capacity of the annotator. One thing to comment there as well, though, is that just because our annotator can be extracted, it doesn't work on every browser, because, for example, earlier versions of Firefox, it's difficult to map a position of a line on a page, and that makes the annotator very difficult to run. It runs with IE 9 now, but not with earlier versions. So even if you can extract it and put it on a website, someone might come to your website in a browser that doesn't work with it.
Yeah. Okay. And before we just go to this other question, Adrian, in practical terms, if there are projects in this room that need a tagger, actually can they come to you and ask for yours? I know they theoretically can, but actually can they?
Yes, subject to. The software behind it is open sourced with some within a sort of. There's no fee attached to it, but it needs to be licensed in some way. So it might be licensed for a project, as opposed to it's just completely available to absolutely anybody. And that approach is very much
As part of the project.
is welcomed by the partners.
So I'm going to call that yes, subject to lawyers.
Yeah.
Okay. Brilliant. Thank you.
Graham Henderson from Poet in the City. My question is rather similar to Heather's in a way. It follows on from it. Just looking at both of your projects, both of which are very interesting, incidentally, in the context of this R&D fund, I'm just wondering whether if they were applicants for this fund, whether the R&D element would be innovative enough, and would NESTA say, oh yes, that's so new, that's so original, that we must invest in it. And also, would they also say this is a business model which is very interesting for other people to follow, or would they say, this is actually taking existing ideas which are quite common on the internet, like tagging, and using them in a new way? So I'm just interested to know what lessons we in this room should draw for the purposes of applying, for the R&D fund.
I would expect you to say yes and yes to those questions. So, where's the innovation? I mean, I suppose there's a more abstracted way of asking that question, because they're the wrong people to answer in some degree, aren't they? Is innovation only found in the technology, or is it found in the application of these ideas to new business models? Because my reading, and I've been in some of the meetings of the NESTA thing, is it isn't about necessarily about technology nobody's used. It can be very much about technology nobody used in this way, in this commercial setting. And the innovation can be in the way you employ it alongside an arts organisation, I think. And somebody's nodding at me, so I'm not about to get sacked from the panel. Does that version of innovation make sense?
Yeah, I mean, to me, the innovation here is the use of tagging, and the particular type of tagging, crowdsourced tagging, and the way that it's done in the sort of the museum archive context. That hasn't really been quite done to the extent that we're doing it.
So that would be your pitch.
That's and what it's trying to look at is this notion and of authority within the museums. It's a big thing that the museums are grappling with, and indeed what we had conceived as part of this was a research project with the Oxford Internet Institute to actually record a lot of that.
Okay.
And we, subject to funding,
Great.
We still intend to do that.
James, quickly.
Yeah, just quickly.
Going over there next to a
Technologically, yes, we are innovative, because I said New York Times annotator isn't quite as good as ours, and we are now looking to embed it in WordPress as well to increase its usage. In terms of application, it's very innovative to have such a large capture of response to a single text, particularly with Shakespeare. And we're looking at turning that into a business model. For example, people able to create their own personally annotated books of Shakespeare, for example, moving to publishing on demand for your own personally annotated book of Hamlet or an ebook. So yes on both counts.
Yes and yes, so that is, thankfully they're both already running, so they're not competition. Yes, please.
Hi. Yes, Nicola Jennings from Together Productions. I want to pick up on something that Anthony mentioned as being the biggest challenge, which is driving traffic to the site. Both projects, it strikes me that you had a great brand to start with. I mean, the BBC and Shakespeare. Presumably, people Google those two more than anything else almost in the world every day.
Paris Hilton's quite high on the list, actually.
Yeah. Jordan, I believe, also is pretty popular. But for those of us that have, I clearly we have to use our imagination in how you drive people to the site, but have you got any tips of how do you go about in a project that you're proposing with a cultural organisation? You know, how do you go about finding and contacting people who might be susceptible, particularly new audiences who aren't necessarily already engaging with the digital world?
Okay, great question. Adrian?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think you probably start from the audiences that you already have. If you it's a sort of obviously a further thing to look at entirely new audience and things, but there are probably ways of engaging your existing audience and keeping in contact with them in new and exciting ways of those people that are very much known to you already. And any of the sort of the big, what I call customer engagement projects that I've worked on have started from that premise. I mean, you might want to think about completely new audiences, and some projects are entirely about, well, how can we get a new and different audience in here? You know, I did a big project for the Art Fund where they were saying, well, we've got all these people, they're of a certain age, they've got lots of money, but what we really want is the next generation. How can we go about getting that? So a project targeted to that. I've just done a big project for the BFI, which is all about customer engagement, and of course their focus is, they have a lot of audience, but they don't really know who it is yet. And so their project is focused about trying to understand it and trying to find better ways to actually do the basics of communication with it. So there's an organizational context there, which depends what you mean by that engagement. Because if you really think about what you're trying to do, there are probably some very simple starting points that you can begin. And then in turn, they will lead to others.
But isn't part of the question also how you measure success then? Because to some degree you're likely to get, you may not get, you're likely to get enormous numbers of traffic, large numbers of traffic at certain level, but there are tiers of how much engagement you then get and how you measure that. So it can be better to get deep engagement from a smaller number of people.
Yeah. I mean, it's being clear about what you need and what you're looking for to start with allows you to do that measurement. So unless you've got a clear idea of what you're looking to do, then it becomes, of course, very difficult to.
That sort of thing that thing about very focused engagement is more where you are at the moment, but maybe not where it will end up.
No, what we're looking at the moment. Well, just to go back to how to attract traffic first. Some of the things we've done is to write to experts on Shakespeare, build up a Twitter following by following Twitter experts on Shakespeare, for example. When someone say, "Oh, what's this Open Shakespeare that's following me?" They go and have a look, and then maybe they follow us.
Forgive me for a minute. Is that a long list, though? I mean, how many, is that ever going to be a long enough list to really get you serious traffic?
No.
No. Okay. No, I mean, that's kind of one of the reasons why I said I have directed Shakespeare. I'm not being anti-Shakespeare. I'm just sort of, that's going to give you great response, deep response from people who care a lot, isn't it? And that may be your objective.
Yeah, well, what that does, that creates the kind of kernel.
Yeah.
And then, of course, this teacher may say to his students to whom he's teaching Cymbeline or whatever, "Oh, well, you can leave your comments on it on this website," and then it starts to grow. Once you've got a kind of respected kernel, is the crucial thing, different kinds of engagement, again, grows out of that. And what we're looking with the annotator is to actually branch it into, have as many different kinds of engagement as possible, because, for example, there's a question all students at Cambridge study, like, what is literary criticism? And maybe it's just as valid to have someone going on to the annotator and saying, "I really love this line of Shakespeare," as to have someone come on and say, "That's an example of synosiosis." And so being able to categorize and distribute annotations so that people can get the experience out of it they want and can go and look at the deep ones, or they can just browse a little, or so having it malleable afterwards.
Okay, understand. Okay, question, gent over there.
Yeah,
and then I'm coming here into the middle of the room.
Okay, hi, Richard from Mongrelex. My question just got hijacked, but I'll rephrase it. If both you gentlemen were to be bidding for this new bid, and the criteria was engaging with new audiences, so say, for example, having Goldie or Banksy images in your project, or having West Side Story or Cockney version of Macbeth in your project? How would you approach that?
Okay. James, can I come to you first?
Yeah, sure. So if I was having an alternative version of Macbeth in Open Shakespeare, or looking to bring an annotator with an alternative version of Macbeth, again, I would look for people who maybe a past director of this production or someone who works on alternative Shakespeare adaptation of Shakespeare, get them as a kind of core to this, and then try and use them to bring in new audiences. The term new in new audiences is quite interesting because for many academics, going to look at annotations online, or for students to look at annotations online, is a kind of new experience. So in that respect, they are a new audience. For a completely new audience, to be honest, I'm not sure, because it slightly depends on the product I'm bringing in.
It's an eternal challenge, isn't it? I mean, you want to get people to watch Much Ado About Nothing in the West End. You put David Tennant and Catherine Tate in it. I mean, at one level, don't you? That's not a technology question, is it? To some degree, it's a kind of marketing question. Does it change? What does it change about a project? I mean, the BBC will presumably, knowing the BBC, have some television shows and some presenters and some talent-led stuff going on as well, alongside what happens with your pictures. Does it change the project?
No, not at all. In fact, that's already there from the start. There are a range of guided tours. I think there are 11 or 12 guided tours that are already on the site, which are from well-known celebrities, including the Reduced Shakespeare Company and other people who are talking about paintings in a way to engage people, and by using a person who you know, Frank Skinner is one of them, for example. He's talking about paintings to do with Enunciation. So trying to put these, opposing things together. So people like Frank Skinner, maybe they'll listen to it. It's that sort of thing that drives interest. But the point of the project is of course there's paintings of all types there. So one thing is if it were different material, what would you do? Of course that you would you would look to make sure that the way in which you were promoting that related to the sort of audience that you would expect to see. So it absolutely is all about marketing and being aware of who you're trying to reach for when. This project is trying to reach lots of different people, but it's all about getting more of them, to actually look at paintings.
Okay, here please.
Hello, I'm Tim Jones. I'm from a company called Moti Roti. My question is, I suppose, about the collaboration between art and technology companies, and it's perhaps less of a question for the people who are up on the podium at the moment, but perhaps for the people who were there previously. And it seems to me, I mean, we're not in the game of a binary art and tech thing here. It should be a synthesis and so on. But I'd like to try and ask a question very much from the point of view of a small-scale arts organisation, looking at how it matches up with tech partners. It seems that the nature of this fund and the timescale and the criteria means that we are in a pretty rapid promiscuity game. There's structured speed dating this afternoon and so on. And I suppose for a lot of small-scale arts organisations that might not have done much of work in this arena before, but might think that they have quite a lot of great ideas to offer, a question naturally arises for me about who you get into bed with, and how you understand that they might have the kind of quality deliverables that the assessors might be reassured by. Because it seems self-evident, there's a lot of tech companies around, this is a very attractive thing for them to get involved in, but it also seems there's kind of an orthodoxy of innovation. You don't have to go far within the kind of interactive media world before people talk about iterative product development, or people talk about agile working methods, or about different means to, radical sharing and open innovation systems and so on and so forth. And those are kind of great, but I understand this fund as an opportunity to help sustain the art sector, not that it's the priority, but it seems to be that there should be something about supporting arts organisations to know that they might not, for instance, put in a proposal with a partner that might be a bit flaky, or might have a poor reputation, or might kind of come out with lots of reassuring sound bites about how it can deliver, but then the assessors might look at it and actually say, well, in terms of the track record of this company, it sort of says one thing and it does another. And the arts organisations might not know that.
Yeah. Okay.
So I just wanted to it's a pragmatic and a potentially sensitive question, but I think it's a very real one that we should be talking about.
Okay, I think that's been heard by the NESTA people in the room. Just to give a I can't channel them, but to give you perspective on it, I thought that what Andrew Nairn was saying this morning about the big 20 million innovation fund is relevant to your question, because certainly in the planning of these sessions and the editorial thinking about, and for instance the speed dating this afternoon, it's a valid result to come out today going, we need to wait and think about this because there's another bus coming in a minute. Just chasing this is not necessarily the right answer. And I think you've got an absolutely the right response. And the reason we've put together this kind of case study model and the themes and all other stuff, rather than a clinic on how to apply, is for that. It's kind of, can we get people on a road? And if some of those people on the road, and it takes 9 months to get them to the point where they're ready to go for some of the 20 million, and I'm not saying the two funds are congruent, then that's not a bad outcome, because NESTA's role and Arts Council's role is developmental and strategic. John's waving his finger at me. Yeah, you can. Can we get a mic to John, please? I didn't say anything badly wrong then, did I?
We thought really very long and hard about whether one element of the fund and the way that the fund worked was going to be a sort of broker process, and thinking about, in fact, why don't I stand up? And we sort of decided against it, one, for the reasons that Anthony's just described, which is it's not just about making applications into this fund, but about thinking about the long game and fostering longer term relationships. Secondly, everyone we ever suggested that idea to said what's common sense, which of course is, in most cases, it's about chemistry, personal relationships, and so if you try and shoehorn technology, sort of approved technology suppliers or partners with other people, then we don't think that is going to work. And so that was part of the feedback that we had from our scoping process. And of course I totally recognise your point, because I know that there are 6,000 or 7,000 digital agencies in the United Kingdom at least, let alone those ones doing great stuff internationally. So, but what I would say is some of the people who are the most interested in working with arts and cultural organisations are kind of in the room today. And we sort of made sure that this sort of day today wasn't just arts and cultural organisations looking to find out how they apply, but actually that there was space for technology people in the room as well. And so it's not, if you want to start somewhere, what I would suggest is start in the session this afternoon. It's not an exhaustive list of people who are here, but perhaps they can help shape your insights and your feelings about what type of people you want to work with and what type of people you don't. In your packs, you'll have seen that there's sort of biogs of everyone and the companies that they're in. We hope that's a jumping off point.
Thanks, John. And there are 4 more of these in other parts of the country as well, coming up. So there is a wider gene pool than people within 5 miles of Clerkenwell in this as well, which I think is important to just recognise. We're kind of running out of time. Well, we are running out of time. So I'm going to ask the guys just to sort of wrap up, and then we'll go to a lunch break. If during the lunch break you can sign up, or at least decide which of the breakout mini sessions you're willing to go to, there are things on the wall to sign up on. You don't have to do that. We're kind of trying to be slightly unconferencey without getting over obsessed with it, so that you can sort of select yourself into those groups, and we're hopefully going to have people who will be helping keep those groups ticking along. But from your experience, gents, of what you've been up to and the projects, not just the projects you've just presented, what would be your key bit of advice? And in fact, if you're thinking of applying, I don't know if you are in any way for a client or anything else, or your project, what would you think was the sort of key success factor in getting a successful project to go and getting it through this fund? Let's start with you, James. Key success factor for you, do you think?
As regards this fund, I suppose the tagline of Open Shakespeare was the marriage of text and technology, and really having that with us the whole time and making sure that would grew out of a spirit of openness, so that everything we were doing was always shared. When the tech guys came up with something, they said, well, what do you think of this? And how does this relate to your experience as a literary student? And so on. And every time literary students were doing something, they thought, oh God, this is coming, and they went and told the tech guys straight away. So really promoting a culture of openness within the project, so that it's a harmonious marriage.
And bringing it back to that core vision.
Yes,
right.
Exactly.
Okay, Adrian?
Well, I would say vision and values would be the, you know, so have a sort of try to conceive of a vision of what you want and shape a set of values around it which keep you sort of structured in some way within the many ways in which that might happen, and be open to a number of ways in which you could achieve your vision within your values.
So at the beginning you said various things about don't be technology led, don't just do
Absolutely.
the latest voguish thing.
Technology is the last thing. Well, not the last thing you think of, because of course it's disruptive, and you need to have the technology there, and you know if you conceive it without the technology, then you won't be aware of what you should be doing. But so if you can partner with somebody, you know, as soon as you can to start thinking about the possibilities, but having a high sense of a vision of what you want to achieve with some clear values around it developed quickly will help you through what you could do.
Fantastic. Thank you. I hope that was interesting / useful, or even both.